right, welcome to another Wicked Smart webinar. If this is your first one here, this is a resource we put together for business owners and marketing professionals to bring resources and experts and speakers and business owners to talk about topics that are relevant right now. And we've been doing this since March. My name is Andy Bonts. I'm the marketing manager for Midwest Family. I'll be facilitating this discussion today. Introduce our expert in just a second. Just want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping stuff where we have this is recorded, so you will get the recording. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and comment if you get value out of today. We will also email you the link and the slides. So for registering for it today, you will actually get the slides with it. So with the YouTube channel, you wouldn't get the slides. So today's topic is how to attract and retain amazing employees and how to repel the toxic ones. And this is our first ever co-hosted Wicked Smart webinar. The Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber was so kind to help us promote it to all of their members. And Arthur over there had recommended Michelle to speak to our audience. So we are very happy for that and appreciate the extra promotion for this one. So yeah, I'm excited for Michelle to talk to you. Her and I met for a little bit. And when we were talking about this idea, they have the EOS program is pretty fascinating. And we wanted to get very focused on employees. In fact, being able to attract the great ones and get rid of the ones that drive you nuts. Because constantly we talk to local business owners and they're so frustrated because they hire people, train them, and they leave, or they can't get enough applicants. And they spend a lot of time, energy, and money dealing with that problem. So I am so thankful that we have Michelle here. I'm going to stop my sharing here and pass it over to Michelle. So Michelle, go ahead and share your screen.
I will. Come on. No mess ups now, right? Everyone's holding bated breath of going, oh no, please don't. At least the three of us are anyway. So thank you, Andy, for that fantastic introduction. I appreciate you, and I appreciate this opportunity. And Arthur and Sarah, I know they're on the phone call. Thank you for getting me involved with, as we were talking about, Wicked Smart. I have some Boston background in me, and so that just rolls off the tongue pretty easily for me. So without further ado, it looks like Andy and Teresa are muted, so I will jump in. Again, my name is Michelle Millard, and I'm an EOS implementer in Southwest Michigan. And this is how to attract and retain amazing employees and how to repel the toxic ones, not just ones that are already in your business before they even get in your business. So we'll talk about that. Just a really quick thing about EOS, as you guys know a little bit about us. So we have some history. We're not practicing on you. This isn't brand new stuff. Some people haven't even heard of EOS. So it started by a gentleman named Gino Wickman out of Detroit. Serial entrepreneur, really has a passion and a knack for entrepreneur businesses, but great ones, and what makes them different from everybody else. And so he had worked together for many years now, putting together what we know as EOS. And the power of it is that we get organizations what we call vision, traction, healthy. And we get them vision from the standpoint of everybody on the same page, knowing where they're going, how to execute on that vision. Traction from the standpoint of instilling discipline and accountability in that organization. And honestly, healthy, we often find that they're not cohesive. They're not functioning, healthy, open and honest, vulnerable teams, especially starting at the leadership level. And what we've learned over time is that if the leaders are not on board, then the rest of the organization goes. So as goes your leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. So as leaders of organizations, we need to look inside to say, how are we not helping the culture? And we'll talk about that from a people standpoint today. Very little bit on my background, serial entrepreneur as well. Started a company right out of school here in Michigan in 1997. Is business to business leads group. And then I actually started a business in 2008 and it failed miserably. So if there's any other entrepreneurs out there, that happens to a lot of us as we go. But what I learned so much about that is I love helping everybody reach their full potential. So I had the luxury of working for an organization that was running on EOS. And that's when I loved it. So it's pretty easy to understand why a leader might love an operating system. But what I enjoyed the most is how our employees just the level of engagement just went through the roof. And so we talk about retention, right? There's lots of different things we can talk about retention, but engagement retention is really what we're striving for. And that's why I love EOS, because I love what it does for the employees as we go forward. So just a little bit of a share about the EOS model, because the background's important. There's some things that I need to kind of go backwards to go forward with. Excuse me, to go forward with you guys. But so we have a EOS model that has 6 components in it, right? And so these are them. So vision, again, I shared with you, getting everybody on the same page, know exactly where they're going to go. People is what we're going to talk about big today. We're going to get you 100% strong in the people component. But data is also driving out emotions and egos. Putting in facts and figures into entrepreneur organizations is a big deal. Solving issues in every organization is a big deal as well. The process component is getting them documented and followed by all. So sometimes we document them, but we're not really following them and holding people accountable to that. And then joking around, but vision down to the ground, right, is traction. So this whole wheel doesn't have any traction if we don't bring accountability and discipline in it. So that's kind of why I wanted to share that a little bit with you. So you know that it's a system, but we're going to only really talk about 2 of those. So you might have to move me because my little slide shows up on the right-hand side. So you might have to move us around as we go. But ultimately, we're trying to get today all of you guys 100% strong in the people components. You'll see a little slide going on the right-hand side of the slide deck. What we love is we strive for 100. We're going to celebrate 80. And so everyone says, huh, well, that's still leaving 20% on the table, Michelle. Most organizations are starting off at 20% strong, and that's their own evaluation, and that's the data we see. And so if we had sent you an organizational checkup to you guys and you would have evaluated how you're doing in the people component, some organizations find themselves at that 20%. And so if we can gain you 60% strong, even in one component, is vital. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's jump in without it. So on the vision side, and I know we're going to talk about the people side, but there's a piece of the people component that is absolutely tied to the vision side. And so when we talk about getting 100% strong, we have to solve what we call 8 questions, and we have to make sure that it is shared by all. So it doesn't just stay in the leadership's head, it goes through the entire organization. And so this process needs to do the same thing. It needs to go through the entire organization. So this is a piece that we call our vision traction organizer. And so these are only 5 in the gray areas. These are only 5 of the 8 questions. And we're not going to go into this because that's definitely not what the seminar is for today. But we are going to pull out the core values. And the reason we're going to pull out the core values today is that's how we evaluate what we call right people on the bus. And so let me just talk a little bit about core values. Every organization has one. Or has them. We have to make sure they are true. And so again, it ties directly to it. So bear with me, have a little faith that I'll get to where we need to go today. But they have to be raw. So I had an organization that said to me, oh, well, we want to have work-life balance. So we're going to put our core value in there like that. And we're going to say work-life balance. And the looks from the executive team to that person was like, but we don't live that. It's going to be laughed at. And that's absolutely what's going to happen. So it has to be you at the core of what you are right now. If it is something that you aspire to, we have to work on that culture and then we can put it in there. So you don't want to have core values that don't mean anything. And so I joke that many organizations put their core values on their walls. So you want to make sure what's on your wall is walking your halls, right? So your employees are walking your halls. They have to resemble that and get that. And so a really easy way to vet that is you define your core values, you put your leadership team up to those. And if they bleed those core values, meaning that they are those core values, then great. Let's take your best employees and do the same thing. And let's take, I don't say your worst employees, but maybe your troublesome employees. And are they the opposite of it? Or where are they in comparison? And that's a really good way to very quickly vet your core values to make sure that they are truly raw and they are truly you today. So before I even go on, so when we tie it together, this all has to be 100% bought in by the leadership team. These core values, absolutely on the same page. So let's jump into the people component and get you where you need to be today. So for us, right people, right seat. So Jim Collins coined the phrase many years ago. So I'm just going to do a quick description of what they are so that you know kind of where we're all on the same page, just in case people hadn't read his book. So right people are people that fit your culture. 100% are your core values. They bleed it. They are fantastic and they really, really get your organization. And then right seat is the skills, talents, expertise that they know how to do the job. So it's the execution of the job is the right seat. So that's the definition of what I will use as a right people, right seat. You have to have both. In an organization, oftentimes we might have one or the other and we accept it as okay. Our point is you have to have right people, right seats. You have to have both. So let's show you how we're going to do that. So we use a tool and develop a tool, what's called the People Analyzer. And it's really a simple, right? You make this Excel document, a pretty simple document. And then you're going to, once your core values are defined, so now you can see the tie-in to that. Once your core values are defined, you're just going to put them quickly on the top of your People Analyzer. These core values happen to be the ones for EOS. And then as your employees that you have in existing, so if you're the owner or the manager that might be, you have just quickly your employees listed there on the left. And then you're going to, let me back up a little bit. This is their first time seeing this. So there's a little bit of a learning curve that you have to do with a more of a coaching conversation of how we're introducing this or why we're introducing this now. So just make sure you do that before it's like, okay, you get all these bad rankings and like, where did this all come from? So no surprises. Please don't do that. But you're going to have a conversation with Joanne and say, hey, Joanne, I think that you are absolutely, your product knowledge is fantastic and you present it in a great way. It doesn't come across arrogant. When you know you're right, you present it very well, right? And so that's a way to say that she is most of the time, which is the plus, most of the time humbly confident. And then we're going to go to Martin. And Martin does not have it. He is maybe even a narcissist, if we know the definition of a narcissist. It's almost impossible for them to do that, right? They are very strong in their personality. They're very confident, but they'll tell you every single day that they're the greatest. And so there's there's nothing humble about them, and nothing humbly about their personality. So clearly that's a personality trait, but it is something that you guys as a company don't want in the organization. So there's a conversation that will happen with Martin to see if they can come around. Because again, this is your first time showing them how to be right people in the organization. We want to show a little grace and we want to work with them and put some resources into them in order for them to raise the bar. And so then we have the same conversation with Ellen. And so sometimes Ellen is, right? So the plus is most of the time. The negative is most of the time they are not that core value. And the plus minus is sometimes they are that core value. And so just easily you go through and rank your employees. And then again, it's all about having a coaching conversation about how they are right people in the organization. And again, this shows it in black and white. And I think that some things that we get lost in is there's a lot of emotions and egos in entrepreneur organizations where it's not as solid in a black and white. And so this is starting to codify that, systemize that piece of the discussion with your employees. So there was a little note that was sent. Please make sure that, again, we're driving out facts and figures. So there was an opportunity where someone had presented to me that, well, this employee comes across as bossy, and different owners think that they're bossy. And so you could easily say, if we're trying to use these core values, maybe humbly confident is not showing bossiness, right? Or the opposite of it, and maybe even help first or even do the right thing, right? So when we're starting to do that, when we define these core values as humbly confident, it's you know what you're doing, but you're not arrogant about it, right? So I don't know this person, but there was definitely a conversation that could be, are they coming across as an arrogant, look what I'm doing kind of a thing? And then that's when you have a conversation with them and say, okay, this is not part of the core value of humbly confident. We want to make sure that we're having this conversation and how do we define that? And as they start to learn what those really mean, they should be defined really well for you guys as managers. But then maybe it's even in there and it says, don't be bossy, right? Or however you want to document the kind of sub story of each of those core values. And arguably, you could even make a core value of don't be bossy if you really wanted to do that. So that is what we describe as right people on the bus. And so we're using the People Analyzer core values, and then we're ranking them. One thing before I go on, the organization should set a bar. So all your managers are very clear of what that is. So in this case, there are 5 core values. 3 of the 5 in any combination, it doesn't mean that humbly confident is always plus, but 3 of the 5 must be plus. And then 2 of the 5 must be plus minus. If you'll notice, no minuses in there. So this is just the bar. It's not saying that Martin should be fired tomorrow. It's definitely saying that Martin needs to have a conversation. And I arguably would say that Joanne needs a conversation. Yes, she's doing great, but let's not pass her up. Let's give her kudos where kudos are deserved, and have a conversation with her. And again, that goes back to more retention and back to her ability to feel like she's fitting in. Everybody likes a little kudos. And again, it's on whatever cadence your company says. We would like them quarterly, but whatever cadence that is, if that's monthly, fantastic. If that's yearly, if that's all you can do, that works as well. So make sure that we set a bar so we know what the whole entire organization is being evaluated on. So that's the first part of the right people discussion. So the right seat discussion, we have what's called an accountability chart. And so many of you are going to look at this in a few seconds and say, well, it's an org chart, which it is, but I would arguably say it's on steroids. So we have accountability built into the org chart. It's not just a reporting structure. So let me show you what we're talking about. So we always believe that there are four main functions within every organization, right? So marketing and sales, so there might be five because those might be broken into two, right? Operations might be broken into two, but those fundamentally are the three at the bottom. And then let me describe what an integrator is. And so that is the person that beats the drum of the entire organization. They love being in the weeds. They harmonize everything. They orchestrate everything between marketing and sales, operations, and finance. And so what we do is we structure first, people second. So all of this is just about structure, no people in here yet. And then we start defining the roles and responsibilities for each of those functions. And again, we define them as if we were sitting on top of the organization, more like a board of directors saying, this is what finance should do. This is what operations should do. This is not what Sally does in finance now, right? Because we don't know if Sally is the right people and right seats. So we want to make sure she has both, but let's define those roles and basically what do we want those functions to do? And then we'll go through and look at it and say, there's also a component that there is maybe, especially in entrepreneur organizations, there's often the owner who started it, a visionary. And the difference between a visionary and integrator is a visionary is at 60,000 foot in their organization. They are bringing in, 10 different ideas in a day. One of them is probably great, but the other ones, are kind of like running after shiny objects because they're a little ADD. They're really great at great relationships and things of that sort, but they have a really hard time staying in the business and orchestrating the business. That's where the integrator fits in. So if there is one, we define that because nothing's worse as having a visionary in an integrator seat. They're miserable. The company has these spikes of 90 days of production and then it lulls because they can't do it. It's just not their arena. But again, remember talking about right people, right seat. So we're going to make sure that that person gets in the right seat. So as we go through this, right, so structure first, people second. This is what, if you bear with me, a right seat might look like, right? And so we have all those pieces and we're starting to now put a name to it. So it'll say operations and then the name, if it's hard to read on your screen, and then all the 5 roles and responsibilities that are on the screen that you guys had set it as. And when we do that and we start to put names with them, we end up with people issues. And we end up with 2 different kinds of people issues. So we end up with right people or right person, right? They bleed your core values, but they're in the wrong seat, meaning that they can't do the job. They are not producing. They are not showing up on time. They just can't do it. And I'll get to what we mean about that and how we evaluate that in a minute. Or you have wrong person, which we've described earlier, is they don't fit the culture, but they are killing it. So you take a salesperson that, if integrity or ethics is in your core values and they are doing an exceptional job hitting their numbers, except they're selling them product that they don't need. They're shyster in the deal on the back end, right? So they're not fitting your core values. And that's what we mean by wrong people, right seat. And so I'll show you now how we talk about that and how we evaluate that piece of it. So we use a term called get it, want it, and have the capacity. So are each of your people in the right seat? And if they're not, you and they will be so extremely frustrated. And then you often find times as a manager, if you are, you're like, I am so busy, but I cannot get my work done. It's oftentimes because the person doesn't get it, want it, and have the capacity that reports to you, that you're actually doing their job. And so if you're spending time, even 10% of your time doing their job because they dropped the ball, then you are frustrated, right? And they are frustrated because they're getting in trouble, right? So we have to make sure that we do that. So what do I mean by GWC? What is the definition of it? And so these are basically the definition of what we mean by GWC and evaluating if they are right seat in the organization. So do they understand all the ins and outs of a position? So if you were hiring a sales position and they did not like to cold call or, you know, start to network and things of that sort, they probably don't get it. They don't get the major function of what's probably necessary in a sales position, right? And then the wanted part is, how do they get up every single morning and are motivated to do that, right? If they're in sales, there is a huge self motivation that needs to happen, that they need to make 15 cold calls a day, and they're not motivated to do that. They need somebody they need to go to an office at 8 o'clock and report in and then go. If that's not how your sales operation is set up, then they are not going to be able to get them going. You won't be able to pay them enough, motivate them enough, force them, right? So that's the want piece of it. And then the capacity piece, depends on where you are in the cycle, right? If you're hiring people, you won't know these things, but we can ask questions around knowledge. But if they're an existing employee, we can definitely know if they're mentally in the game, right? Or if they're emotionally able to take on that job or what have you. And it says in there, these are negotiable. So the get it, the want it, and we go back into the people analyzer, this will become a little bit more clear. The get it and the want it have to be yeses in our bar that we set as far as EOS and how we work with clients. The capacity part is negotiable. So in that example I just shared with you, if you are a manager and then you're not having the time capacity to do your job, then we would hope that that organization would work with them to say, okay, what kind of time and resource do we want to put into that person so that we make sure that they can get stuff off their plate in order to be able to do their job, right? So the capacity one is not so, as we say, we're not going to die on the hill if that is a no, to be able to retain somebody or to bring somebody into the organization. So let's look at about in that people analyzer again, right? So we have Joanne and Martin and Ellen again, and Joanne is across the top. And so we have conversations with her. Clearly, all yeses on this one is, now you know the job. Do you get the job? Do you know the ins and outs? Are you absolutely on board with it? And then the want conversation is, this is how I rated you a yes. It seems like you really want it. You're here early. You work through lunch. You get the job done. Whatever that conversation might be. And then the capacity is, they're finding time. They have the knowledge, they have the skills, they're getting involved, they're getting excited about it. If they're a leader in the organization, they're pumped about new things that are being rolling out. And again, down at the bottom, there's our bar, right? 3 pluses under the right people, and then 2 plus minuses under the right people, and then all yeses. Again, that capacity can be a little bit negotiated, but all yeses in the GWC, or the get it, want it, and capacity. So that's what we're talking about, and right seat in the organization. So let me back up real quickly. I just wanted to make sure one thing that I had a little note on. Please make sure when we're having these conversations, again, the facts are this, right? So if they don't have something that we are saying June 3rd, July 7th, and yesterday, you did not resemble the help first. And here are examples of exactly when. Again, I can't stress enough the ability to drive in facts and note it as we go. So maybe the first time you didn't talk about it, I would argue say you should have it as soon as it happens, and you should have that conversation. But maybe you weren't able to, and so it's all documented really well. A lot of times people come to us and say, well, they're overstepping their bounds, right? They're not playing in their sandbox, as this person had described to me. And I said, okay, so we've got to use that accountability chart when we say those little boxes. What is their function? That is their sandbox. And so how do we hold them accountable to that function and those roles and responsibilities? And that is definitely something that I would say when they overstep their bounds, to document that piece and be like, okay, so why are you going over there into finance when you are, the head of sales? What's the problem? Well, I don't think that they're documenting our commissions properly or something like that. Now we're having a discussion that it's of concern, and we've got to work as a team to do that, versus it's just them being bossy, right? Or it could be them being overly assertive, whatever those roles are from there. And then the other piece I wanted to make sure I talked about in that people analyzer is, this is a tool, right? Again, black and white that you can start to systemize and the process for it. I just kind of want to drive that through, that it's always, it's not just winging it. We really need to make sure that our employees are worth it and that we make a system for them to do that. So sorry about going back a screen, but I just wanted to capture that note of something that was shared with me. So we talked about the title is how do we attract and repel, right? So let's talk a little bit how do we attract when it comes to the interview process and repelling from the interview process standpoint and getting them out, right? So the toxic ones out, so that it can be both, and you can actually achieve it using the same way. So here we are again with the people analyzer. We have our core values at the top and our GWC on the far right of that piece. And now we have Joanne candidate, Martin applicant, and Ellen prospect. And we're going to use the same bar as we set for our existing employees. And then we're going to do behavioral based interview questions. And we're going to ask Joanne candidate, tell me a time where you knew your product, but you presented it in such a fashion that it didn't come across as arrogant, right? Show me a time where you sold this product to this person and you would sacrifice your own commission, but it was the right thing to do, right? So we're having conversations with all of them about every single core value that you want to have them bring in the organization. And so it's just a piece to make sure that we're hiring the right people as they come into the organization. I want to pause there really quickly. One of the other things that I would suggest is your core values. I would plaster them all over your job ads. I would have them on your career page of your website. I would have them on your LinkedIn page. And then as a recruiter, if you're a recruiter within the organization, have them on your LinkedIn page, right? So what it starts to do and talks about repelling candidates before they even get to your door is that if I don't know. I'm not sure any people would self-evaluate whether they're help first or not. But there's definitely an ability to know if you're over the top help first, or if you're just gonna, drive right past the accident, right? Oh, that guy's probably hurt, but I'm going to keep going, right? Probably not a help first mentality. So there are people that will look at core values and say, I'm not that. I'm not going to apply. So I'm being funny, but if it says a core value needs to work 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week, how many people would very quickly go, nope, I'm not replying. I'm not doing that. So that's an extreme. You don't want that necessarily as your core value, but that's an extreme that can show you that there are people that will definitely look at that and say, I can't do that. So you really want to showcase your core values on the front end. That's a little bit side note, but it helps repel potential candidates coming to you before they even get to you on that standpoint. All right. And so then we do that for every applicant, and we're looking at that saying, okay, so we thought that, Joanne was a really great candidate and we're talking to her. But then as we do this, we're looking at the chart and say, okay, Martin's definitely out of these candidates. But look at Ellen has our exact 3 pluses and 2 plus minuses that is in there. She is right people for our organization. So then we go back to the right seat, right? So now we're going to go, okay, we evaluated the right people in the interview process. Now we look at the right seat part. We pulled the function, right? So, okay, we're looking for the salesperson that's going to be out on the sales calls and meeting with our customers and showcasing our product and services. We're going to evaluate whether they actually get the ins and outs of it. Do they want it? Are they motivated to do it? And do they have the knowledge to do that? So how do we do that? So we bring up the same chart again, same bar, and we look at Joanne and we say, okay, Joanne, do you so she probably hopefully looked at the job description, you've talked about it a little bit, so you understand that this is a sales job. Share with me a time where because you have your resume says you have that skill set. Share with me a time. What does your day look like? How did you get motivated in the day? How did you handle tough customers, right? That's all the problems or challenges that come with sales jobs that are going to tackle that get it, want it piece. The knowledge piece and the capacity, again, this is an interview prospect, so it's hard to do some of the other things like spiritual and passion and things of that sort. But knowledge you can absolutely test and say, how did you learn about products? So how did you learn about the printing products that you were selling before, and now you're going in and you're selling cell phones? How did you learn about that, and how did you come up to speed? And they're going to tell you maybe how they took the initiative to go and do that, and they took classes and they went on sales call rides with their manager, and however they did that. If they don't really have that behavioral based or that behavioral skill set, they're going to fumble through that. And then you'll know that, quite frankly, they don't have all 3 yeses or a no in there or what have you, they're going to be not in the right seat because they don't get it, want it, and have the capacity to do that. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And again, we look at all the candidates and we say, "Oop, still Martin is still a no." And you would do this all at once, right? The interview process would be all your right people and then all the right seat with Joanne and then all the right people questions, all the right seats. So I broke it up just so we could, our minds could take it into right people, right seats. You have to have both, but it's easier to show you guys that way. And then you say, "Oh, well, Ellen Prospect looks fantastic. We'll hire her." Right. And then that's kind of how we go through that piece from there. So again, just to reiterate really quickly, I'm almost to the end here, a little bit early, I think, but so right people, again, exude your core values, fit your culture like a T. The core values are raw. They are really, really you guys as a company. And again, vet against your leadership team, vet against your top performers to make sure that they are right. And then right seat is the accountability chart with the 5 roles and responsibilities that are in there. And then again, defining that structure first, people second, and then handling those people issues as they come up with it, whether you have right people in the wrong seats and going from there. So I think that's about all that I have. I'm a little bit early, but I'm hoping that we have some really good questions out there. I know that Andy had sent me some before, so I can address that one too, Andy, here in the end, if we need to do that. So I will stop sharing.
And as we're changing screens and things, if you want to open up your mic, you certainly can ask. I do have one in the interim while we're waiting. It makes complete sense. I like the whole people analyzer chart regarding core values, but in the interview process, people can say a lot of the right things, and we can spend as much time in testing and assessing as we think we need to hire that candidate, thinking they're hired for the right seat, but over time, the interview guy is not the same as this person we hire when it's all said and done. So how it seems a little bit gray for me. How do you assess the GWC part in an interview process?
Yeah, so you can assess it the way we talked about it and going through there from there. There is, I will not lie to any of you, there is definitely people that have swindled me and gone in there and then they just change, right? There's also that opportunity where they have been a stellar GWC for 4 years, 5 years, and they just don't want it anymore. And so from the interview process though, it's really just, you got to kind of go with your gut and then keep hounding away at this question. So what I would always do is tell our teams to drive through there. So if you have a little worry on the want, right, their motivation to do something, is keep drilling away at, share with me a time where you had to be self-motivated to take on a project, or is there a time? And so as you start to dig deep into the wanted or the capacity and keep asking questions around there, I have found that it often will fall apart, that they can't sustain it. So they've rehearsed the one question and the answer to what might be, and then you start digging deeper and you're finding that that's really not them. They were rehearsed or coached well enough to get to the 1 or 2 questions that there, but then the answers start getting a little wonky and start getting a little weird, not as confident, and then it starts throwing up red flags for me.
Thank you.
That did help you, Teresa?
Yeah, and then as we're waiting for questions to come in, go ahead, Andy, and ask your question.
Yeah, we had some email question in. When you have multiple decision makers and they all kind of may report or have differing opinions on an employee, how do you get consensus, or how do you, if there's drastic different opinion, do they, the 3 yeses, or do they, demonstrate the core values of the company?
Right. Yeah, it is. So the hard part when you have 3 owners is that the employee is probably feeling the stress. To be honest with you, go back to a little bit of a structural concern here. Is that who do they report to, right? So if they report to the one person, they should be the one making that decision. But there's often times where there are 3 owners, and even though, let's say it's Jody, Bob, and Andy, and they report to Bob all the time, but Jody and Andy have an opinion or a say, it makes it very difficult. And I'll state that very first off, is that it really needs to be much more by the accountability chart, and that one should be there. Now I get this, that's great, but some of us in HR don't have the control over 3 owners wanting to evaluate that. So a little bit that I allude to in the conversation is, let's just say that they are always late or what have you. I would try to make sure we're starting to document that, right? And so if you're, I want to say defending that employee, that's not really the right word I want to use, but if you are their boss and you're saying, well, they're not always late, and so you're starting to document that piece, make sure it's documented when they are less. So I always stress, just drive in facts and drive out emotions. And you had hit it, is kind of like, well, they just kind of, I don't really know. And, the boss, Bob, sees them every day, where Andy and Jody might not see them. And so they're assuming certain things, or they're hearing certain things. They're not involved in it every single day. So really drive that accountability chart to, know who they're reporting to, and then ultimately who's holding them accountable to the evaluation of the right people, right seat. That would be my first response to that. But then once they come in and they're already in, and again, they were talking about, I think they were talking about, Andy, if I remember right, they were late, they were being bossy, and I think there was one other thing that we're talking about is, so do they know what bossy means? So Andy and I know each other a little bit. I'm a little over the top assertive. I have been called bossy a lot, right? And so what does that mean? Does that, to that person that is saying that they're bossy, I have had this experience. If they're an extreme introvert, I have had introverts say that I am bossy, and I get it. To them, I am over the top loud, right? And I'm over the top arrogant and those things. So we have to make sure that we're not using the emotions of that bossy thing to being evaluating. So when we say humbly confident in this kind, maybe even the description under humbly confident says, don't be bossy. And then our employees start to define and understand what it means to be humbly confident. So I'm hoping that answers that person's question a little bit. But if you're on the phone and you have more needs, then please step up and ask away. So
I have a couple questions. So when you're documenting, do you have any like best practices on documenting those instances? Because I love the idea of facts, not emotion, because I think there's a lot of people there's a whole lot of things triggering people in today's world, and most of them are not based on facts and logic. They're feelings and emotions, which are important, but
correct, not when it comes to evaluating people. So I would just say the most important part, Andy, you were saying, what are some of the tricks of the trade? Do it. Just do it. I don't care if it's on a Post-it note that you have a manila folder and you stick it on a Post-it note and say, this is when they did it and this is when they didn't do it. Just capture date, time, who was there, who wasn't there, kind of just what was going on. The best thing would be to capture it and then have the conversation, right? But sometimes you're not even there to see it, right? So it is, one of your other employees that report to you saying something about another employee that that reports to you as well, and so you weren't really there, but capture it and get their story from it, and then go have a conversation. And I think the hard part is that sometimes we're worried about what that conversation is going to be like with that employee that we have a concern with, right? And but if it doesn't happen, it just festers, and it goes back to the GWC. That will just start to blow up, right? Because if they're feeling that they're not being felt like a teammate, or they're feeling like they're being undermined, they're just gonna not show up, right? And they're just gonna be like, yeah, whatever, I'll just get paid until they fire me, or I'll just get paid until I find another job. And we know how productive people are that are already halfway out the door. They're just not, right? And so we have to make sure that we're, it's better to have those conversations, as tough as they may be, but again, document it, date, time, who was there, what happened. And then again, if you only do annual reviews, which is tough on my part because I can't remember what I did yesterday. So I like mine monthly, but quarterly is good enough. But just make sure you're documenting it throughout the quarter, because you're not going to remember at the end of March what something happened in January. It's just not humanly possible. So again, anywhere that you want to document that, make any sheet that you want to make. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's just internal. So
Michelle, another question, and we work with lots of clients of all kinds of various sizes, small, medium-sized businesses. And there's a school of thought, this person's a really nice person. They've been here a long time, and it's clear that this person is in the wrong seat. People trying to find a position for somebody that's been there. What are your recommendations, and how do we not make both parties miserable?
Right.
When they're put in a position where their position was saved because they're a nice person.
Mhm.
What is your advice for us to talk to the clients that we talk to, and even in our own world, when we know that the person is a good person, they put 10 years in or 4 years in or whatever it is,
Yes.
but the position has evolved,
Yeah.
and we put them someplace else just to keep them. What's your advice?
Yeah, so clearly right people, right? So we like them, right? They
Mhm.
maybe even bleed our core values, and that's fantastic, but wrong seat. And so what the conversation will be is all around that GWC. And then ultimately, if you can't find a seat, and we are all proponents of, if you have right people, try to find a seat for them, because maybe it's literally, so everyone probably knows the Peter principle, right? So you take the best salesperson and you make them a sales manager. They just don't have the GWC to be a manager or to lead, hold people accountable. And so then you just made them miserable and you made them out the door, right? They just took off out the door. And so what you're saying is, one, how do we not make that decision poorly, right? And so how do we not do that? But if we have, then we have to have the conversation to put them in that seat that they were great at. And so if they can't find a seat, so in your scenario, Teresa, is that they are right people and there's just not a seat in the organization whatsoever, we just ask our employees or our customers, for myself, to ask them to leave the organization, because it's going to be frustrating to everybody. And honestly, they're frustrated. They are so frustrated. Sometimes they just don't know they are. They don't know where to go. They're fearful of change. So sometimes we've had employees that are there 20 years and got very comfortable in their seat. And they are just like, I'm just going to stay here under the radar and no one will see me, not ruffle feathers, right? And they're not doing your organization any good. And they're hard. I mean, I've had my fair share of teams in my life, and those are tough decisions. But ultimately, if you can't find right people, right seat, you have to ask them to leave the organization for the greater good. And that's the point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michelle. We're coming up near the end here. So if people do have more questions about this, what's the best way to contact you, Michelle?
I can put my email in chat. I don't know how you guys want me to do it. I don't think I had a slide because I didn't know what was up on there. So I can give you my email address. I'll shout that out if that's okay. So it's Michelle with one L. You can see that probably on my window if you can see it. So MICHELE at your, so YOUR, Sherpa, SHERP as in Paul, A as in Apple.com. That's probably the best way. I have a website on there called Your Sherpa, your-sherpa.com. You can find me and stalk me on LinkedIn. I'm a lot on LinkedIn. I'm on there a ton, and my profile's on there. Just find me. That's perfectly way. Any of those three ways are the best way to catch me.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
thank you.
Michelle. I got a lot out of this, and it's definitely, I'm a big framework and process person, and a big believer in practice stoicism. And stoicism is the foundation is facts and logic, and not to let emotions lead your actions. You control the narrative that you tell yourself, but you can't control what happens to you. So,
Yes.
and it allows you to sort through facts and logic and not walk around upset and angry all day.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. I get it.
Anyway, so yeah, thank you so much. This
My
episode will
pleasure.
be on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to revisit it, share it with people on your team. Our next Wicked Smart webinar is talking about email marketing. So if you're not familiar, there's an app called Parler, and it got shut down from app stores and because of some political stuff. And this isn't going to be a political discussion. It's going to be talking about the importance of owning and renting your marketing. Because a lot of times, if you're renting your marketing, you're paying somebody else to market on their platform. At any point in time, they're in control. So by having a solid email marketing strategy, you'll be able to have more control to where you can take that and it's your asset, and it can be more efficient sometimes to be able to market to those people. So Jenna Apgars has 11 digital marketing certifications. She is a special email marketing specialist among 10 other specialties. She owns her own marketing firm also. She's a certified partner of Digital Marketer, and I talked to her. We were supposed to meet for 15 minutes, and we ended up talking for 2 hours. So that's what happens when you get two marketing nerds in a Zoom room. So I welcome you to join that at wickedsmartwebinar.com, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Arthur, and the chamber for co-hosting this with us. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Ciao.
Thank you.